This encounter happened a few months ago. I have a job as a cashier in a very popular and big nationwide grocery store chain. Here's a quick backstory. Before moving to Michigan, I grew up in the state of Maine. I'm not saying that everyone from there does this, but in the area I lived in, men would call each other buddy as a friendly greeting. Since I lived there for about 24 years of my 27 years, it's just become ingrained in my head, and I usually always refer to males as buddy. If you don't like me calling you that, just simply correct me in a polite manner. I'm willing to apologize, and I'll do my best to remember. Anyway, it's near the end of my shift. I'm helping put away go-backs, the items that customers don't want, and they give to the cashiers, or stuff that people left on the wrong aisle. They thus need to go back to the shelf, where they belong. I'm heading down an aisle where things like pasta, pasta sauce, racks of spice and flavorings are on. As I'm drawing near to the other side, I see two men there. One man, in his late 30s, early 40s, with a big black beard, wearing a college jacket and a baseball cap. He has his back turned to me, and he's looking at the racks of spice. And the older man? He's in his 60s or early 70s. He has a thin black coat over a red dress shirt. He just started to come into the aisle, and he was on the opposite side of the customer. As I saw the first customer, he started to raise his head up and began looking from side to side. I assumed he was trying to find something, or perhaps he didn't know where to go. So I left my cart, and I walked up to him from behind. I smiled and I asked, "Hey buddy, is there anything I can try to help you with?" The customer turned around to look at me, and instead of answering, he looked down at the floor out of the corner of his eyes. I had noticed, but I stayed silent in order to let him speak. However, he got me off guard, as he suddenly sighed, and he raised his hand up to me. "Look, don't call me buddy, okay? Call me sir. That annoys me so much. I hate it when all young people around here call me things like buddy." Now, I'm slightly taken aback by this, but he isn't really nasty. He just more or less sounded tired of the whole thing. So I wanted to be respectful and apologize. Now, during this part here, the older customer starts to perk up, and he's starting to pay attention to the conversation. "Oh, I'm very sorry, sir. It's just I'm from a different state, and using buddy as a greeting is a normal thing over there, and I tend to do it without realizing this." I was about to say something like, "I'm sorry, and I'll try to remember and call you sir, and apologize again for upsetting him," when he cut me off. "Well, you live in Michigan now, so you need to stop that. You need to start calling other people like me sir from now on." I stammered a bit as an awkward smile began to appear on my face. I'm utterly unsure how to respond. The customer starts to turn away to leave. Then a voice surprises both of us. The older customer then says, "Well, you live in Michigan now. Well, what about me? I don't want him to call me sir. It makes me feel old. I don't like that. I'd rather be called buddy. Are you seriously telling him he's not allowed to call me something just because you're offended by it?" The customer with the hat brings his hands up with a tired expression on his face that screamed, "No, that's not what I meant." His reply was, "No, I just don't want to be called buddy. I just find it to be disrespectful, that's all." "Well, then politely tell him instead of snapping at him and being rude." The older customer cut him off and continued, "Oh, so it's not disrespectful. It's not like he did it on purpose to make you upset, or the word means something bad. It's just a friendly greeting. There's nothing wrong with that." If people's jaws can drop on the floor like a cartoon, mine would be doing that at the moment. One second I'm being lectured about being disrespectful, and the next, some random old guy steps in to defend me. Like, I know it sounds ridiculous, but I swear this happened. After the older customer said that, the two of them kind of chatted for a few seconds before politely agreeing to disagree and parting ways. But as the other customer started to leave the aisle, the older man turned to me, rolled his eyes, and said in a loud enough volume for the other guy to hear him, "Some people are just uptight. Don't let them get to you. If it wasn't for the fact that I was trying to process the whole thing, I know for a fact that I would have lost it and started to laugh. What I find really funny is I actually don't go out of the way to call people sir, because living in the area is a lot of older people, and a lot of them, they don't like it. As a matter of fact, they hate it because it makes them feel old, and they don't want to feel that way. So if I can't call people buddy, and I can't call people sir, then what am I supposed to say? Hey dude, what's up broski? Yo home slice. I just really don't know. P.S. As a side note, the customer that snapped at me is a regular at the grocery store. And well, as a malicious compliance, I followed what he requested of me, and I didn't call him buddy. But now, I don't call him anything. I specifically make sure to never refer to him with any kind of noun. For example, is there anything I can help you with? Instead of, is there anything I can help you with, sir? Or, have a nice day, instead of, have a nice day, sir. I'm not sure if he's mad about it or not, but he recognizes me, and I'm one of only 4 male cashiers in a list of 30. But hey, at least I'm following what he wants, right? What's he gonna do? Complain to my managers that I'm not going out of my way to call him sir? Yeah, I don't think so. First, I should tell you that in high school I was trained as an auto mechanic, and further, I have a love for old cars, classic cars, and even hot rods. But this is not a story about that. No, you see, after high school, I worked for a few months at a local grocery store until I quit so that I can work at a self-service gas station, which seemed to be a better fit for me since I was trained as an auto mechanic, even though I was not hired as an auto mechanic, but a gas station attendant. But remember, this was a self-service station back in the 80s, and it was privately owned. I had been working there for about a year, so I knew a lot of the regular customers, which, with that in mind, I had a guy who showed up every Friday night, drove up in an old 1972 Ford LTD. Again, this is 1983, and this customer was always drunk, to near insane levels. The other thing about this regular customer, that even though he drove a literal relic of a car, he was always dressed in a suit and tie, like he was a lawyer or something. I asked my manager once, and he told me that he worked in a courtroom as a bonded carrier, or some kind of court deputy or something, but he wasn't sure of his actual job. One other thing, I have to point out that after working at this station for a year, it was normal for me to actually run the store alone most of the time. So I was more like a night manager when I worked in this place alone, on nights and weekends, and there wasn't anyone else except for 4 of us that ran the store on totally different shifts, which I was surprised that they gave a kid like me the responsibility of managing a store, and I was only 19 years old, which is another point that I do stress here. But getting back to the Friday night, this regular customer drove up in his old Ford, rolling in around 9:30 at night, and like clockwork, he pulled up to the gas pumps, which at first I kind of ignored due to the fact that every week around this time on Friday, he would show up completely drunk, tanked to the gills, smelling like scotch and cheap bourbon. So when he pulled up to the pump, it was normal that he was filling his car up. But what happened next was totally unexpected. I ducked into the back room, knowing that this guy was for gas and a pack of smokes. Like I said, he was a regular. I noticed that his brand of smokes was empty, so I grabbed a carton from the back and quickly returned to the register, which is when I noticed that he grabbed a pump nozzle for the diesel gas pump and was now starting to fill up his old gas-powered car full of diesel fuel, which I immediately hit the kill switch, shutting the pump off before walking out to tell him about his error, which I should have mentioned. He only got $5 of diesel in his car before I killed it, which would have saved him costly repairs. But before I could get to the door, he was storming across the lot screaming at the building as he walked toward me. Now, I swung the door open to inform him that he was putting diesel fuel in a gas-powered car, and he started ranting and screaming obscenities as he got closer to me, and this is how the conversation went. Sir, I shut off the pump because you're filling your car up with diesel, and that's a regular gas car.
I come in here every Friday and I fill up my car, you idiot. Why the f*** did you set up the pump?
Cause you were putting diesel fuel, which could hurt your car. It'll mess up the engine in your Ford.
I fill up my car here every Friday, and you waited on me before. Why the hell did you shut off the pump?
Because you were putting diesel fuel in your car, and your car takes regular gasoline, not diesel.
Yeah. I don't know what kind of fuel my car takes. So turn the f***ing pump back on or I'll get you fired.
By now, the guy was literally face to face with me, just inches from me, and I could smell the strong smell of rank booze. And because I was only 19 years old, and my family taught me that the customer is always right, I turned around and walked back inside, turned off the kill switch, and fired the pump back up, allowing him to complete his transaction, which back in 1983, he filled up his 1972 Ford LTD, all 24 or so gallons, with diesel fuel. And after he was done, he came in and paid for his gas and demanded his cigarettes. He paid me, and he continued to mutter sarcastically under his breath, belittling me and berating me. Then he went out and climbed into his car and drove off. But this is not the end of the story. As you can see, he is a regular customer every week. After this event, I came in to work the next day, and as I came in, 2 managers were waiting for me as I walked into the building, plus the independent mechanic who rented the shop that was part of the gas station. Suddenly, all 3 of them surrounded me, all grinning from ear to ear. I looked at them and they began to ask me,
"What happened last night?"
And I told them that the guy in the old Ford came up drunk and demanded that I allow him to fill up his car with diesel. And I explained to them how drunk he was and how rude, but I still allowed him to do as he pleased, and I switched the pumps back on. And all 3 of them burst out laughing as the mechanic put his arms around me and took me to look, spinning me around to see that the old Ford was now sitting on the lot, broke down, because the old 1972 LTD does not run on diesel fuel. In the end of this story, it took him 3 weeks to repair the car and to get all the parts. Then once his car was fixed, I was standing there another Friday night, and it was around 7 p.m. and he pulls up right to one of the pumps. At first I was freaking out because of how he talked to me. But before he started to fill up his car, he came inside, which was unusual. He walked right up to me, and now the conversation went far better than I expected, because the guy was not drunk. I have never one time seen this guy sober, and here he is. And the conversation went like this.
"Were you the one who worked here a couple of weeks ago when I came in?"
"Yes," I replied sheepishly, not sure where he was going with this.
"Was I rude to you and screaming at you?"
"Yes."
"Did you allow me to fill up my car with diesel fuel?"
It was then that I began to shake with fear, because I was afraid he was going to take a swing at me or start screaming again. But honesty is the best policy, so I replied, "Yes." And then I further explained, "But I did try to prevent you from it. I shut off the pump and I told you what you were doing. And I said it was going to hurt your car, and you told me to do it anyway." For a moment he froze, and he just looked at me blankly, as if he was wrapping his head around what I'd just said. And finally, after a long pause, he looked up at me, and he must have noticed I was uneasy, because his voice almost became a whisper.
"I'm so very sorry for how I treated you."
And that was the last time I ever seen him again. After that, I'm not sure if he came back in on day shift or to another gas station, but I never saw him again, and I worked there for another 2 years. So a bit of backstory. I worked at a grocery store as a cashier, and I've been there around 2 years. The store, with the exception of Thanksgiving, Christmas Eve, and Christmas, it's open from 6 in the morning until midnight. And I'm one of those rare retail workers who prefer to work midnight shifts, or ones that often are in the evening time. The reason why is because my best friend is insomnia, and I often end up falling asleep around 3 or 4 in the morning, so it happens to work out for me. I often get the midnight shifts. Now there's some things you need to know about my store. 1. It has a fuel center for the cars to fill up outside, and this closes around 11 p.m., to which the manager on duty has to go outside around 10:45 to help the fuel clerk shut everything down. 2. Normally, from June to the end of December, business in the area still has a steady flow of customers after 10 p.m., so they try to keep 2 or 3 people in the front end. But during January through May, which this story is in, business was very slow. After 7 p.m., there's very few people, or nobody at all. As such, only one person is on the front end after 11 o'clock. And 3. When there's only one cashier, they are to remain at the self-checkout and not the register. That way more people can be rung up and be out of the store on time before it gets to midnight. And almost all of the customers in this area know that. 4. Recently, our store was going through a policy where only 3 people can be put on a register or on self-checkout during the day. Like register 7 can only have employee A, B, and C, but they want to allow employee D to hop in there, so they have to go to a different register. I think corporate is doing this so that they can narrow down the mistakes, and it would be easier for them to find any mistakes or errors. I don't know, it's just the rule. So, Q2 today. It's pretty close to 11 p.m. I'm currently finishing up go-backs, which is items that customers decided they don't want and they leave it at the register, so I need to return it to the shelves. The manager on duty is already out at the fuel center, helping close it down. My coworker, we'll call her Jade, is on the self-checkout. She leaves at 11, and knowing this, I head to the front to tell her I'm going to put the cart away, and then come back so she can go home. She's nodding, and a customer, who seems to be in his late 30s, early 40s, comes up to the self-checkout. He has a smaller cart, which has only 2 items, 2 boxes of coffee, which are very light. You can hold each one in each hand with ease. But I notice he keeps looking up to our 5 normal registers, which are all closed, and their lights are off. Also, quick note, all of the registers, besides 11, has had their money drawers taken out and put in the office.
Excuse me, are all the registers closed?
He politely asked, looking between the 2 of us. Now, Jade raised her eyebrow at me, but didn't say a word. I decided to answer him. I said, unfortunately, yes, but the self-checkout has 6 lanes open right now. The man was a bit dejected, but not rude. He stammered for a bit, and he kept glancing at the closed registers.
You can't open one of them up?
At this point, Jade is getting a bit impatient. It's like 2 minutes after clockout time, and she should be out the door. Now, she's not a nasty person, but she's not exactly cheerful or outgoing. She cuts in before I could say anything.
Nope, I'm going home. He's the only one here, and the store rules state that he has to be at the self-checkout.
At this point, I'm up for helping him out. Sometimes we're allowed to help the customer scan the items, and I thought maybe I would diffuse the situation, since he only has 2 small items of coffee boxes, and walk to the closest machine and politely motion to it.
If you like, sir, I can scan the items, and all you'll have to do is pay. Would you like me to do that for you?
Is there a manager? I blinked in surprise, as the customer, while having a polite tone and somewhat of a strained smile, basically just ignored what I said, and he looked over at Jade. Her reaction? The same as mine, taken aback at this guy. For some reason, wanting to bring a manager into this. She looks at me, implying that I should reply.
No, sir. The manager currently on duty, he's outside helping the fuel center close. They won't be back for another 10 minutes. Maybe even 15 or 20.
I explained, Jade backing me up, silently nodding to the customer. At this point, the customer looks really uncomfortable. He's not fuming in rage or about to burst into tears, but he's rather off-put that he can't get to a normal register for some reason. And yet, what he says next is why I wrote this story.
Can you page the manager?
So let me get this straight. This guy is being so stubborn that he's trying to fight against using a self-checkout machine to scan 2 items. I even offered to scan it for him, which would essentially be the same thing. And he wants to bring a manager into this, despite the fact that I said the manager was on duty outside. Just why? Both Jade and I slowly look over at each other and stared for a moment. After a bit, I had to fight against myself not to sigh and spoke up.
Call the manager with the phone. The number for the fuel center should be there.
With a bit of passive and tired annoyance in her motions, Jade walked over to the phone and called the manager while I went over to put the cart back in the lobby. When I came back, she told me I was to open Register 11 to ring them up. Register 11 had 3 people on it already, which means now I'm number 4, which we're not supposed to do. Great. At this point, I think the customer realized just how inconvenienced he was making the entire thing. While Jade and I weren't rude, we continued to be courteous. This whole thing had become awkward now. He clearly avoided eye contact with us, and his body was slightly tense. He had a very nervous expression, and he tried to come off like he was busy. The moment that the order was finished, he booked it out of there with the 2 boxes of coffee and the cart. After closing Register 11, Jade went back to clock out. I signed into the self-checkout, then she came back. She looked at me in the eyes with a greater, incredulous look. Instantly I understood. 2 items. Even after I offered to do it for him. We paused for a long second before I sighed, and she rolled her eyes up to the ceiling. Then she waved goodbye and left. 10 minutes later, the fuel clerk walked in to clock out, while the manager followed behind her. I locked eyes with her, and I said, 2 items.
What?
She thought that he had a full cart of groceries, and she was livid. Thank you very much for joining me for this edition of Fun with Ret'Hell. It's not necessarily I Don't Work Here Lady. It's some viewer submissions that I got. I thought they were pretty good, so I just wanted to share them. I think I'm going to go back and do an I Don't Work Here Lady next week. Later on this week, I'm going to have Sir Ham and the Goblet of Dew. It'll be a 2-part series. There's like 6 stories, and I'm going to read 3 at a time, so I hope you enjoy it. That'll be coming up very soon. I want to give a special thanks to my patrons and also to all my listeners out there. I absolutely love being able to do this for you guys, especially for those ones who are having a really bad day and it helps you out. It means the world to me because doing this actually helps me out too. Being able to see all the wonderful comments, it's indescribable. You hear other YouTubers saying it too. I can really see why they say it. So please keep commenting. I love reading them. I usually always give them a thumbs up, even though you might not get a love. That thumbs up's probably from me. So thank you again for watching. And remember, have fun with your failures, or they'll have fun with you.